Welcome back to the podcast. As always, I'm your host, Andy Pedic. I've got a really great guest today. Her name is Alexandria Necker. She owns a business called A de May Jewelry, and she makes all kinds of gigantic, amazing custom jewelry pieces for the fancy, elite, the artsy, all kinds of interesting folks. So the minute you start following her on social media, you'll get it. We're talking big and colorful and awesome. Thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me. This is actually my first podcast, so I'm even more enthused to be here and to be on my first show.
So outside of giant jewelry, how do you describe what you do?
Oh, that's a great question. I think at the kind of core of what I do is that I challenge the status quo and I celebrate what makes each individual special. I love thinking outside of the box when it comes to creating jewelry and really creating pieces that celebrate the individual or the couple. And with designing custom, the sky is the limit. So anytime someone wants to throw a weird or crazy or out there a unique idea at me, I'm all about it.
So what was it like? Obviously your bio says that you're a third generation jeweler and you make custom jewelry. People come to you and seek you out for your craftsmanship. What does it take to get to a point where you're so good that you don't have a physical storefront where people are buying branded jewelry? You're doing all custom.
That is something I have yet to figure out. I am still every day learning and growing as both a business owner, a creative and an artist, and a jeweler. And I think for me, removing the storefront was more about the approach and the interaction I wanted to have with my clients than it was being any level of status or success as a jeweler. I really like to focus on the individual connection and getting to know people. And for me, removing the walk-in aspect allows me to go by appointment only and really get to spend that 90 minutes with a client in an initial appointment and ask them, who are you? What are we looking to create? And really explore the things that are important to them. I think another aspect of that that's really great is that my overhead is also quite a bit less than your big box jewelry store or a Tiffany's or even a K's. And I get to put the savings back into the client's pocket a little bit. And just really focus on the things that are important to me.
So what does your business then look like compared to how it was 2 years ago or when your parents were running it or your grandparents were running it?
Yeah. So my grandparents started Necker's Jewelers in Iowa, small town DeWitt, Iowa, of about 5,000 people shortly after the Great Depression. And that story is something I honestly hadn't even heard until a few years ago. And my grandma was telling me about how, they scraped every penny together and created their dream of, serving other people through jewelry. My dad and my uncle eventually took ownership of the business, and I would say they really built it into the mega, super awesome, amazing jewelry store that it is today. And through a lot of creativity and honestly hard work, my dad is still there like 5 or 6 days a week. For me, I actually started this business about 2 years ago. So we're coming up on our second birthday. And I've worked for a lot of different formats and different stores. And whether that was, a family-owned business or a design studio or a national chain. And I've kind of taken a little bit of everything to create my format that I exist in today. So for me, 2 years ago, this didn't exist at all. It was really an idea and a big leap of faith that, and also too, I think a little bit of frustration and being like, how do I do all of this? I know what I want to create. I know what I want to do. And I know the people I want to serve, but how do I make it all happen? And frankly, I think I got a strong push from my friends who were starting to get engaged. I had friends reaching out to me and asking, hey, are you in jewelry right now? What are you doing? What's going on with you? Because I really want to get a ring from you. And I realized that I I don't need to know everything and how it's all going to come together right now, but I know that I really want to do this and I need to make it happen. And so in the middle of the early days of COVID, I started my jewelry business.
So beyond the sourcing elements and all of the big commercial parts, which I'll come back to, what does it take to learn all of the CAD design and the pedigree of training that you've had to get in order to make this kind of stuff?
I think everybody has a little bit of a different start and a place where they began their journey. And I think there's a lot of different ways that you can be a part of the jewelry business. For me, it was growing up in the industry and having exposure to that I think has helped a lot. But I also was an artist at heart and really wanted to do something a little bit different than what my family was doing. So for me, and I think really a lot of people just having experience and just working for other companies and businesses and um, learning in the midst of all of it, I think is really the best way to learn in this industry. That being said, I have also taken classes to learn how to do CAD design for jewelry. I've realized since then it's maybe not my passion. I like sketching and drawing and playing with the stones a little bit more, but it's a great industry and opportunity for people who are CAD designers or engineers if they want to do something that's a little bit unique. So you can go that route. Um, Another option and way to really learn a lot is to pursue an education in jewelry through the Gemological Institute of America. And for me, that's always been a big dream. I know my dad, my uncle studied there, and I got to be honest, I fell in love with the campus in California. So it's a really unique way to get hands-on experience, lab experience, and work with industry professionals to either become a graduate gemologist, which I'm studying on right now, or if you want to go in design, there's that option too. And they even have programs to help educate people just to become a better salesperson. So it's a really great institution.
As an independent designer, craftswoman, are you able to have the same access to stones as larger stores in terms of wholesalers or however the sourcing works?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say that I can procure and source stones that are the same qualities you'd find at a Tiffany's or a Harry Winston's, but for less. um, and I think another thing that's great is because I source each stone individually per each client and what their specific needs are. I can really use my resources to find the perfect stone for that person. A lot of times, um, I'm trying to find the right word and I don't want to single anyone out, but a lot of the times, if you're a really big institution, or maybe an online retailer, they'll buy their stones in bulk, meaning that they didn't actually go through and hand pick out the best crystals or the best cuts. And now they're trying to sell those, and it's not as individualized or personalized, and often you lack a little bit of quality when you buy in bulk as well.
So when people have the whole mindset, kind of like buying a car, where if I go into the store, they're going to mess with me, but there's this company called Blue Nile where I could get it online and it's hassle free. More often than not, they should be working with a human in some way, right?
I've never thought of it that way, but I think it makes total sense, especially um, with our generation being so internet savvy and that being such a big part of our shopping experience. My recommendation is to use that as a platform to maybe do your research and figure out what do I like, maybe not like, what can I get for a certain price point, and use all of those as a reference point to then go in and maybe work with a professional or someone who's a gemologist or has been in the industry in person. I think, and frankly, I work online or virtually with a lot of my clients through virtual appointments, and we'll take high definition videos and things like that. But I think that there are some potential issues or downfalls of just shopping online purely on price and the certificate. especially when it comes to fancy stones. All of the grading systems that we use are based on grading round cut diamonds. And we've kind of used that to give a general reference of what, maybe an emerald cut or a pear cut might look like online, or the big one that everybody is really into these days is the oval cut. But what you're not going to see is necessarily how that reflects light, or, not all 1 carat stones look the same. Some look a little bit bigger and you can get more bang for your buck. So I know it's intimidating to go see a jeweler in person. And to be totally honest, like, it's intimidating for me. It's intimidating for me to walk into a Tiffany's or another store because I know that there's a pressure to buy potentially, or, do they like the shoes I'm wearing? And there's these thoughts that come into your mind. So I think for me, my recommendation would be to find someone that you trust and really connect with, and let them be your guide through the process of finding the right diamond or gemstone.
So what is it like working in an industry that is so traditional and doing it in the Instagram era?
I think one of the great things with tradition is there's room to break some rules. I like the challenge and push the envelope and see, what can I do that's different? And not to say that I don't love and respect tradition, because I absolutely do. But I also like to see, what could be different and what can change. I think one thing about the Instagram era age that's so cool and unbelievable is that anyone can create a following and a community around what they do. And you get to share your art, the creative things that you come up with. And it's also more accessible to just ask questions. I get a lot of people who just message me and go, okay, tell me about this. Or what is this? I've never seen this before. And I love that I get to have a conversation with people and talk about what I love, and also be a guide through that in social media. I think that being said, it's interesting with it being such a traditional industry, in that we lag behind a little bit when it comes to using the internet, or I shouldn't say the internet in general, but I know for years it's, okay, well, why should I have my products online? Or why do I need Instagram? This seems like a lot of effort, and I'm not really sure what the outcome is. And I think millennials in particular, we need to kind of investigate and study and do our research before we walk into a store sometimes. And I think technology can only benefit the jewelry industry. I think there's a lot of people doing neat things with NFTs, or speculating or brainstorming doing things with NFTs. So I'm excited to see where tech and jewelry merge and what happens there.
Are young people going to want to go into jewelry in the future?
It's interesting. I think that there's a place for everybody in it, really. I know there's people out there who love doing the physical manufacturing and doing things by hand, and it's quite therapeutic. I know that there's people that, with anything like fashion or real estate or any other traditional industry that's been around forever, there's always a way to reinvent it and find new energy and excitement in it. I hope that people like to stay in jewelry and keep challenging, what's come before. I think we've seen a lot of that with asking for more when it comes to traceability of stones and knowing where things have come from, and having a presence online, or lab created stones has been something that's been a pull from the community and the public, and there seems to be an interest in it. I would love to take someone under my wing personally. That'd be great.
Well, you just don't see very many designers that are under the age of 50. You expect to see some kind of dated showroom with a family-owned business or a gigantic corporate chain. And it's not very often that you see people like you. And if you do come across them, you assume that you need to be like a professional athlete or something, and it's going to cost me as much as a house. So having some kind of accessibility to someone who is young and stylish and different, it's very unique. And very few people think of starting from zero to come up with a piece of jewelry. I find that super, super fascinating.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. It honestly means a lot to me. And I think I hope to be the person that keeps bringing light to the myths or the unknowns in this industry, and just being, I like being transparent and honest. I like being the person that people can go to and be like, is this weird? And I'm like, it is, and I love it. Let's do it. How do we make this happen? And it's, yeah, I think I feel honored being the person that gets to do that every day. And it's not often, and personally I've experienced this, it's not often that you're the person with different ideas, or maybe you're a little non-traditional, that you often have someone take the time to get to know you and know why those elements in a piece are important. Or if you're like, I want a black diamond, there's not often too many traditional, I guess, formats or stores that go, that is totally great and I love that. You might get into the debate of, well, here's why you need this. And frankly, I don't think anyone can really make that call on what someone else needs or wants, unless maybe you've taken the time to really hear someone out. And yeah, I think I see a lot of potential for people to continue to do unique stuff in jewelry. And for instance, I don't know if anyone else is a little bit of a video game nerd who's listening to this, but there was a huge League of Legends World Championship, and Tiffany's designed the trophy. Trophy seems like it doesn't even do it justice. It's a piece of art. It's epic. And it's really cool to see a jewelry company push the envelope on what can we do next that's different and unique, and helps people of those audiences and younger generations see that, hey, we see you, we're here, we know this stuff is important to you, and let's celebrate that. And I think that's really cool.
I really like what you said earlier and what is in your branding and all your media about the personality and the experience of the customer. You and I talked a little bit previously about how when my brother proposed to my sister-in-law, she wanted to have a sapphire, not a diamond. And he very specifically wanted a Montana blue sapphire because it's a particular color that they mined in Montana. And she's got a cabin in Montana. She grew up there. And you were telling me that there's sourced somewhere in the Southern Hemisphere in Australia or something. But he wanted one that was a specific size and it had to be from Montana. And the fact that it took 6 months for them to dig one up or find one we were lucky we started early because I helped design it. But it's so unique that you can provide that experience for someone the way that they envision it. And, Montana's kind of a unique thing. Not many gems are named after a place. But I have a small story about this. My ex-wife has family up in the Puget Sound. I'm from Seattle. And out on the islands, one of their favorite things to do as kids was to walk along the beach and hunt for agates, which is a semi-precious stone. It's got kind of a waxy look, maybe like amber for people that don't know what that is. But it's a rock that I found on the beach. And for years we did this like every weekend. And I never found any. Like, I don't know what it is about my eyes, but I was so terrible at it. But when we first started dating, maybe the second or third time that I did it, I looked and looked and looked for hours. And we got to the very end and I looked down and there was one right between my legs. And it was pretty big and it had a lot of flat surfaces. And on my way home, I had this vision of turning this into a necklace, like a pendant. And so I literally on a napkin, I drew this closure in 3D and I kind of rendered it the way that I thought. And I went to a place and I said, I don't even know if this is possible. They don't really cut stones in this kind of shape, but I wanted them to cut it into kind of a cube and then put it into this cool wrap that had metal around all the corners. So this group in Seattle looked for me and they found they had to send it to California to this special lab because they couldn't cut with the right kind of drill to not shatter this thing. And then the closure that they designed it up for me in CAD and we made it and it was really cool. And, we're talking like a lot of money for a rock that I picked up next to my shoe, but it was such a cool process because I had exactly what I wanted in my head. And maybe not very many people could sketch in such an exact way. Like, thankfully I have an art degree too, but I had a very specific idea, and to see it in my hand a couple months later was such a cool thing versus just like pick this band that a million other women have and like make it a little bit bigger or fuse the bands together or a different stone. So do you see, what percentage would you say of your clients want diamonds? Are you doing mostly engagement rings or is it a variety?
First of all, I loved hearing that story. It's so cool. It's so nice when you feel like someone takes the time to be like, yes, how do we bring your vision to life? And I think part of the reason why I love designing is, when you look around or say you go shopping and you just never really, you're like, oh, well, this is kind of maybe that I like that, but like it just doesn't really hit home. And then you find the one thing or piece that you're like, someone saw me. Like, I don't know where they are out there in the world, but this is me. And so it's cool that again, in your experience, someone took the time to design something to your vision. And I'm sure that undescribable feeling of seeing it in real life is just.
It was exactly what I drew on the piece of paper. I mean, it was amazing that they brought it to life. I have one silly question, actually, before I ask you a real question. So they have those programs now where if you get married kind of young and you don't have a ton of money, you can use your same, maybe they have to redo the prongs, but you can upgrade the diamond. If you go to the jeweler that you worked with, oftentimes they'll let you sell the diamond back to them and get a bigger one. Do people actually get attached to the stone or the piece itself? Like I bought my ex these diamond stud earrings and we upgraded them a few times over the time we were together. But do you think people get attached to that actual stone? Because when I designed that necklace, it was a very expensive endeavor for a rock from a beach. I could have bought her diamonds and thankfully it worked out. But I've always wondered because like guy rings are more of a symbol than being attached to the actual ring. Do you think people like to do the upgrade? Everybody wants a bigger stone, right?
They do. And that's typically why I go, okay, let's maybe, if we've got to pick stuff on budget, maybe we try to focus as much of that into the stone. Maybe we go a little bit on clarity or lower in color or something. We make this stone really pop. And that way you don't have to redo this down the line.
If you get a halo, you can't go bigger.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think everybody's so different. For me, I get sentimentally attached to everything. I even have furniture in my apartment right now, so I'm like, oh, I don't know why though this piece I need to keep. I don't need it. It's not really that special or fantastic, but it means something. And so for me, I get attached to the stones, I get attached to the metal, I get attached to the story and the process, and even the sketches I've drawn. I'm just a very sentimental human. But I think everybody's different. And for some people, maybe it is keeping the center stone and redesigning a ring around it. And that kind of captures the original feeling. Or, I do a lot of redesigns with grandmother's jewelry or, someone that maybe is no longer with us and we still want to keep their memory with us and close. So we'll do a lot of redesigns around the stones and the center stones or the accents and kind of reinvigorate the piece or give it new life to represent the new person that's wearing the jewelry. So I think it just depends on the person. I haven't had yet a client that's gone the upgrade route, if you will, but I'm sure it's inevitable that someday we'll run into those unique situations too.
Right. Okay, so backtracking to the stone question, do people, obviously you probably deal with more diamonds than other stones, but are you doing mostly engagement rings? And what is the demand for different things?
Yeah, I remember now that we didn't quite get to that one. I started off on your story. So now I'm glad you brought that back up to the front. I do a lot of engagement rings. I really do a lot of engagement rings, but I find that I also work with engagement rings that use, sapphires or black diamonds and wedding bands as well. That being said, I also work on a lot of creative projects, whether that's repurposing, an existing piece of jewelry or stones that you have. I also, one of my favorite pieces and one of my first pieces that I worked on since starting my business was designing a custom made necklace for a Denver rock star, if you will. And we had so much fun with that project, working on creating this custom necklace from scratch that, he wears every day now. And I just think that that's so fun. He's like, I can't find this anywhere. I know what it is in my head, but it doesn't exist. So it was cool to work on that project with him and, bring his vision to life.
When you get something that unique, it sounds like you're really into the design and fabrication side. Is the sourcing side really stressful when you have to get the thing to go with it?
It depends on the project. And I'm working on being more zen these days. I think that often the right stone will appear when it's meant to and at the right time. It's a little bit of that what's meant to be will be sort of thought process. But I had one really unique project where it actually did start off with, we want a Montana sapphire, and we want it to be around 2 to 3 carats, if we can find that. Well, the majority of Montana sapphires are under 1 carat. And I'm someone that often goes, yes, we can do this, because I know that we can. We always will. It always works out. But I didn't realize that it was going to be so challenging to find a Montana sapphire that was over 1 carat. So I think I contacted literally like 50 different sapphire suppliers, and we started broadening the search. People that weren't in my original network of suppliers, and I'm just like, anybody, like, we got to find this stone. And it became basically a sapphire hunt for the right stone. And it was fun. I'm like, I want to do that again. I love being challenged. I love anything that's a little bit off the beaten path and requires some creative thinking as well as designing. So
I was super high maintenance because my brother is just like really type A. He cares, but doesn't want the details. And I was like best manzilla. And we found one that's almost 2 carats from Montana, but it took 9 months. Just so cool.
I think another thing that's maybe a common misconception until you go into the experience of finding the perfect diamond, if you will, or the one. I often joke that it's like finding the right man. You have to find the right diamond too, and it might take a little bit of time. There's a conception that like diamonds are so plentiful, they're everywhere. But the reality is that the ones with the right characteristic, the right size, the right color, the right shape, is it cut well? When you start narrowing in on those really important parameters, you start eliminating a lot of diamonds. Like the majority of diamonds we actually mine are used in drill bits. So when you think of it from that perspective, the numbers just shrink and shrink and shrink until you're like, okay, I have 10 diamonds that fit all of these different requirements. Now, which are like the top 3 that I want to show this client that I think are the rock stars of the group? And that's typically how I kind of come at that approach.
It's so funny because I grew up in the Northwest and work on the West Coast, and you probably know they just get annihilated by ads from Tom Shane and the Shane Company. And it's always like, my son and I go to Antwerp, Tel Aviv, and Mumbai directly to the source for diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. And every single one, it's like in Linwood next to Alderwood Mall, South Center off I-5, or Tacoma near the Pacific Lutheran University. Anyway, I could probably do like all of the California markets too. But every time I see a stone, I'm like, yo, bro, is that from Antwerp? Did you go yourself? And it's so funny when you get those things just burned into your skull. Do people ask you about ethical sourcing?
It's interesting. Even when I was a kid, I mean, like, this is so weird, but I remember people coming up to me as a small child telling me that diamonds were bad. and I'm like, I have like, why? I don't understand.
Then Leonardo DiCaprio taught us about blood diamonds.
And I'm like, I cannot. And then we have Uncut Gems, and I'm like, so we've got 2 Hollywood movies that paint jewelry in a terrible light. And I'm like, can someone, for the love of God, make a good movie about jewelry? Because it does so many good things, diamonds and jewelry do. I mean, they fuel economies, and I also know so many jewelers personally and stone suppliers that go and volunteer in the areas that they actually mine diamonds in, which I'm just like, that's on my bucket list. I'd like to go do that too. I do get questions about ethical sourcing. I get questions about what does the Kimberley process mean? And in with that is, of course, the famous Leo movie about blood diamonds. And it's actually a much narrower definition than I think what comes to mind. And really, it's just, there any diamonds that are procured or funding violence and wars. So it's a pretty narrow definition. That being said, there haven't been any diamonds like that of that nature in circulation in years. It was a very, very small percentage. I think it was like 1/100% or something very small. Not to, say that it wasn't a big deal or terrible, because it was.
But it's so sensationalized because of the media.
Yeah, and it made it seem like the diamond industry as a whole was participating in those kinds of things. That being said, something that's recently happened when the war between Ukraine and Russia started is we were no longer sourcing and using diamonds from Russia. So today, the reaction to that stuff happens a lot quicker, and just that we don't want any kind of
conflict diamonds.
Yeah. And that being said, I find that people are interested more than anything else to just know, where did this diamond come from? I'm super curious. And if there's any doubts on that, I typically go to sourcing from Canada, if we want to know, or recycle. I call them recycled diamonds, but diamonds that are previously owned, vintage diamonds, if you will. And that's kind of cool too. I own a lot of vintage diamonds personally, but it'll be interesting to see how that changes. It's really, really tough. And I don't think I realized the gravity of how hard it is to actually know where all of the rough is coming from and how it moves through that process, until I started studying it more. I know that the blockchain way of tracking things has been talked about a lot as a positive. And I think it could be a really cool way to do that. I also, though, I'm like, on the flip side, someone enters wrong information into the blockchain on sourcing diamonds, that's going to carry throughout the entire process, and we won't know, but it's permanently in there in that diamond's history. So it's interesting. I don't have the answers, but I'm curious to see kind of where that goes and what happens. I think that's another kind of advance that we're working on now.
What is it like to have the liability of some of this stuff? I had a client for a few years that owns a jewelry store here in Denver, and he had a bunch of like Nuggets and Bronco player clients and was making these gigantic rings. And we did his social media, and every couple days the FedEx guy would come and there'd be envelopes. But like one day I was over there and he said, "Oh, you're going to want to see this one and you want to check it out." And he opened up this envelope that was like, the one you get with a magazine in it or something, or a book from Amazon. And he pulled out a ring that cost $250,000. He was like, "Here, want to go take pictures of it?" And it was, I was carrying around this ring downtown in the mall that is the cost of a house. And he was like, "Oh no, they're insured, no big deal." But like, it comes in a regular parcel with the mailman.
It's interesting. I feel like everybody has a different approach. I've worked at a company once where, and this is literally the worst case scenario in my mind, is someone had shipped something that was an heirloom, something that was worth a lot of money, and it was really sentimentally important. And to me, I'm like, that is when something like that gets lost or stolen, there's no dollar amount or insurance amount that's going to just fix that and make the pain go away. So I think I use a pretty strict approach to even the most basic things, where I'm like, I'm insured in my home, I'm insured when things are shipped to me, and like that's where the jewelry stays. Because it's tough when something like that gets lost and it's meaningful to someone. But yeah, everything is covered by insurance, so that's a blessing and all of that. But it's, you're careful about how often do you talk about your business out in public, or where you're going. And part of the reason too that I opted out of a storefront is the security. It's a lot more secure in a building where, we have security out front, people are scanned up, and we're in a private office. versus, there's been a lot of theft, I know, specifically in California with storefronts and things like that. And insurance is helpful, but it's scary. You can't undo the fear of watching that stuff happen or being in person there. So it's security is obviously like a high issue and priority and things that you work around in this industry. But I've been pretty thankful and lucky, all considered.
My office in Denver was one of them, at least, was in the university building, which is one of the oldest buildings in Denver. It was built in like the 1880s. And there was this jeweler that had been in business for 70 or 80 years, and they decided to close. This is actually pre-pandemic. And the safes that were in the back were so large that they were over the 2,000-pound capacity of the elevators. And they actually built them when the building was scaffolding. But I've never seen a safe so big. I mean, it's like almost 6 feet tall. So cool.
Huge. They're huge. And like, again, early childhood lesson is like, you don't mess around near the safe, you will break a finger. Like they're massive, they're huge, they're incredibly durable and strong. And dude, the security at jewelry stores is just insane. Like the idea that anyone would think that was a great place to go pull off a heist is not smart. It's just not. You have cameras everywhere. Like there's all but like laser beams on the floor,
So if they're not the same, what is the coolest thing that you've ever made and the thing you're most proud of?
Oh my gosh. That's a great question. I'm sure I'm going to think of it like later and have a different question, but the thing that, so the thing I'm most proud of, and what was the other one?
The coolest piece you've made.
I think I genuinely feel really proud of every piece I make. That's a little cheesy and sentimental, but it's true. I feel really happy that I get to create pieces of jewelry and use my passion to help other people and make other people happy. I think it's really cool that something that I created and put a lot of thought and time into, someone wears every day and looks at and they go and smile and they think about something or a place or a feeling or a person. And yeah, I feel really proud about they're like all my babies and they're all my favorite. Coolest piece that I've ever made.
Because you've done some crazy stuff with colorful gems and all that, right?
Yeah, I think the first piece that I made that I really thought like, hell yeah about was my first black diamond client. And she just made this piece for herself. It wasn't an engagement ring or anything of that nature, but she was like, do you work with black diamonds? I've always had this fascination with them. And I'm like, yes, my first black diamond piece. I'm so excited. And because I love black, obviously.
Have colored diamonds gotten ruined by K jewelers? You can just nod if you don't want to say on the media. They have like the brown ones, like the Levion and all that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would be responsible for ruining that. And I think on the flip side, you have J-Lo who's rocking a green diamond ring. And so I think color is having a moment in stones.
I know a couple people that have amazing yellow ones, but the common public just thinks yellow is bad because it's on the normal color grade of not good, right? That's like how low does it go? H, but that would be like a Z.
It goes to Z. So your colorless zone starts at D, goes D through F, and then G through J is your near colorless. And those tend to be the most popular ranges for your colorless, if you will, or near colorless engagement rings. That being said, when I think of that, if I'm a little bit of a bargain hunter, maybe it's the Midwestern in me. But like if I saw a Z colored diamond that looked yellow, to me it's a yellow diamond. I'm gonna rock it. I don't really care what the perception on that is. If I like the color and if it speaks to me or a client of mine, I'm like, let's do it. That's fantastic. But it's interesting. I don't know I think colored diamonds have been pretty popular, but it'd be interesting to take a poll and figure out what people think about the other colored stones, and if Case has ruined it for them.
So tell me this. I've spent some time diamond hunting in my life. I'm single now, by the way, if anybody out there. But to me, it's like the first priority should probably be cut, because regardless, it's how it's going to sparkle, and then get the biggest thing that you can afford, and then get a color higher than DE. Like, when you look at people that want the perfect diamond, but they get like a little tiny one because they want it to be perfect, there's something about the purity of it all. But like a VVS2 versus a VS1, like no one in the universe is ever going to have equipment to see the inclusions unless you're with a jeweler, especially your fiance.
It's so true. It's like absolutely 110%. What's funny is like, I have met maybe one client that was a woman that wanted a very, and to be fair, again, she put the priority into, I want a very, very, very good cut. Like as ideal as ideal. And we sourced her a Hearts on Fire diamond, which to be fair, I am still like mind blown with the technology that goes into their cutting. And she was like, and I don't want a big stone. She's like, I work with my hands. I'm a doctor. I would like something that is designed and it's very classy and sparkly. And I just want like a carat. I don't want anything bigger than that. I want like a flawless Hearts on Fire cut diamond. And we sourced her an H-colored stone. But because the cut was so impeccably good, it appeared a lot brighter. So there's lots of different variables that you can play with there. I think any jeweler would say that the cut is most important, because it's what allows that diamond to reflect a lot of light. And so if you get a stone, especially with, per se, oval cuts, if you get a stone that isn't cut really well, it can actually have shadowing and points of dark spots in them where it's not reflecting light. And that's, to me, it's kind of a bummer. I would probably go for a very good cut stone to an ideal cut stone. And I tend to go in the near colorless range of H, I, G. I'm personally a G fan. And, something maybe like SI1s are great, in my opinion, which means slightly included. And even with that, there's so many variables. Not all SI stones or VS stones look exactly the same. So you can often find a stone that maybe has some white internal characteristics or crystals inside that reflect and play off the light of the stone really well, or are hidden, under a prong. And you can really maximize that size. And yeah, I don't know, me personally, I'm not perfect, so my diamond doesn't need to be. But it sparkles and it looks good. I'm stoked.
Do you think it would help jewelers to keep some more crappers around? Because people think of the shape as in looking down on it from above, and they get a little bit of like that upper shoulder, especially if you're looking at something like an emerald, like the way that it's cut. But the rest of it is buried in the setting, and the cut is actually like those really wide ones that are super shallow cut that are underneath, but you would never see that in a setting. I want somebody to show me like a really crappy cut one that is practically flat because it's cut so shallow.
And some people like the flat cut shallow ones too. It all depends on the person. If it looks big from the top and it sparkles a little bit, perfect, sold, done. So there's some variety there. And really, I think for me, I'm like, I got to learn what they're into and what they like. I think it would be nice to have a reference of some stones of like, hey, here's a poorly cut stone. This is what this looks like in comparison to something that's cut really well. I should do that with my future clients. I tend to use a lot of images and visuals or videos and not in-person stones to show that. But for me, I think there's nothing better than when you can see and feel something and hold it in your hands and really look at it and see how it plays with light.
Well, and if you created some kind of like tabletop cyclorama or something like photographers use, you could use one of those pen lights and hit them all from directly above and show how it radiates out, just a non-pro. So for people that want to get into jewelry, what are kind of the things that you wish you knew 10 years ago, or you would say to somebody who's starting now?
What I would say is that there's a place for you. There's a place for you. If this is something that you're passionate about, don't let one person tell you that you can't do it, or that your ideas are not worthwhile, or that they're outrageous, or that's never going to happen, or that will never work. And um, really follow your passion and find people who will take you under your wing and allow you to grow as an individual. I feel really lucky for so many of the experiences I've had. Um, and oftentimes those jobs I got when they weren't offering jobs, go ask somebody. Go ask the jeweler down the street if you're interested. It's actually a very welcoming and open community, and we're excited by people who share our interests. So if you want a job in jewelry, don't be afraid to go knock on doors and ask if someone's hiring, and or if they have advice too. I don't think that you need a formal education to be a jeweler, be in the jewelry industry, or sell or design. I think passion is ultimately, with anything, what will drive you and keep you learning. One of my biggest challenges is that I love what I do so much that I find myself working when I'm not supposed to be working. Um, so if it's something you really like, just dive in and make the most of it, and don't let the naysayers get you down.
So outside of the industry specifically, as a business owner, you work in something that's, for lack of a better word, fancy. So working in kind of a high-end industry, but being a solo practitioner or leading a small team, what have you learned that you would say to other people just as a business owner? Maybe it's something about insurance or websites or whatever. What would you say in your experience in the last 2 years that you've learned that you'd like other people to know?
Could be social media too.
Yeah, I think something that I've really worked on is my personal stuff, if that makes sense. I think you often go, I'm just going to start the business, I'm going to do these things, and I'm an expert in what I do, so it's all going to work out. It's going to challenge you in ways that, like, you can't expect that or prepare for it. Um, and if it really means the world to you, to hold on to that and keep it in mind. I find that the universe likes to poke at you and give you little tests to see really how committed you are to making it work. It's like, would you like a job over here? How about this over here? And it's like, no, I really, this is going to work. I love it. It's important to me. And I think having that conviction of self is really important, and doing the internal personal work on things. I think something that I didn't expect is you sometimes question your skill set on certain elements, and it's not worth throwing out the all the good stuff. I'm like, I'm not great at accounting, and I'm like, I need someone to help me with accounting. That's just done. I need that. It's a part of my team now, and I think that there's a constant learning process that has to be accepted. It's always going to be learning all the time. It never ends. And but there's also a lot of excitement in that, and growing and learning more.
So this is something I like to ask everyone at the end, and it doesn't have to be to business ends, but do you have any books or podcasts that you're loving that you'd recommend for people?
Ooh, I'm always reading something here and there. Brene Brown is like the rock star of my my self-improvement and growth. I love her podcast and I love her books. If you're an entrepreneur, a book that might not come across your mind as something that would be beneficial to you in your business, I'd recommend her book, Daring Greatly. She talks about the man in the arena and what it means to be the man in the arena and how challenging that is. And
that one's really good, an audiobook too. I've read the paper one and listened to her.
I have too, and it's like that's the one that will keep you going on the hard days. And I think about that. I'm like, okay, I'm daring greatly today. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna be vulnerable. I'm gonna do the hard stuff. And she's just awesome. So I really enjoy her.
Great. And finally, what are all the places people can interact with you and maybe work together?
Yeah. So my Instagram is probably the number one easiest place to find me because I know everyone's on Instagram today, and that's Adamae Diamonds. It's super basic. It's just ADMAE Diamonds with an S, and I'm always accessible via there. I also have a website which you can schedule appointments or learn more about how the process in general works. I'm also starting to offer permanent jewelry as a fun little thing to do. So if you have an event coming up or a bachelorette party, birthday party, whatever it might be, and you want some bling at your event and a little memorable take home from whatever that experience might be, send me an email or find me on Instagram or my website because that will be a lot of fun.
I would freak out. Every time I've gone to a place when they do like the tie-on bracelet where you just leave it on until it falls off, I can never do it. And it's always like such a good reason or something, but I'd freak out if it was soldered on. And so another good important point is for the big jewelries, you don't have to be in Colorado. Anybody out there can work with Alexandria. You don't need to meet in person. Hopefully you would, but she works with everyone.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Distance is not a factor in creating custom jewelry. I'm great. Again, another benefit of technology is that we can do video meetings. I'm really great at taking high quality, good photos so you can see what each stone looks like and we can talk over that via distance. So it's surprising that actually half of my clients, I would say, are not located in Denver or in Colorado. So it's definitely doable.
Thanks so much for being on the show. We'll look forward to having you again soon.